How would you describe images of outer space to someone who can't see?
With points of starlight behind it, the nebula itself is shaped like an irregular oval with lacy reddish-orange plumes of gas and dust. Further inside the circle, the gas and dust glows bright blue. A glowing white ring separates the red and blue gases. In the center of the rings are two stars, one glowing much brighter than the other, with diffraction spikes radiating out from them.
So with the latest release of the James Webb Telescope images coming out of NASA, everyone has been abuzz with how exciting and brilliant these images look, except for me. Because obviously, as someone who can't see, I don't get to enjoy these images of space the same way everyone else does. So I was feeling a little bit of FOMO, I felt a bit left out, and so I decided to do some research into the images that were being released by NASA even though I couldn't see them, and I found out that NASA actually does put alternate text or alt text for their images. Isn't that nice, being inclusive to blind people for once? So good job, NASA, or is it too early to praise them? Today I'm going to be taking a look at some of the alt text descriptions that were provided by NASA in order to understand what on earth these images of space actually look like. But before I move on too far, let me briefly explain what are alt text or alternate text. These are text descriptions that can be tagged and added to images in order to help the blind understand what is inside an image. These are not lines of text that you would see, but will be picked up by the screen reader technology that blind and vision impaired people use. Alt texts are also meant to generally be neutral, unopinionated, and descriptive. So for example, if we have this picture of Elon Musk right here, this is an example of a generally good alt text.
Elon Musk wearing a suit looking at the camera.
And here is an example of alt text that maybe isn't the best.
Elon Musk, the rich coward who couldn't buy Twitter for $44 billion.
So two of the places where NASA has uploaded images that we'll be taking a look at today would be their website where they put updates on the James Webb Telescope and their Instagram. Links in the description below. So first, here's the description that is on NASA's website of the Carina Nebula.
An undulating, translucent, star-forming region in the Carina Nebula is shown in this Webb image. Hued in ambers and blue foreground stars with diffraction spikes can be seen, as can a speckling of background points of light through the cloudy nebula link graphic.
Okay, that was a lot of info, so let me try to digest what it was saying. One thing that the NASA alt text here does pretty well is that it describes all the essentials that are visual, so things like color, shapes, and even some random details like the speckling of lights that come through the cloudy nebula. But one thing about the image is that I don't really get a sense of the scale of the image because I don't know how, for example, how far away this image was taken, which I know is not part of the actual photo. So in terms of best practices, you're only supposed to be describing things that are visible on the photograph itself. But when you're talking about space, I don't know. I think it might be nice if the alt text also had descriptions on how far the nebula is from us, because I have no idea what scale at which this image was taken. And that can put into perspective the accomplishment that is the James Webb Telescope. Okay, next is the Stevens Quintet tab.
Galaxies in Stephen's quintet appear as purple-pink swirls against the blackness of space in this JWST image, Some foreground stars appear with diffraction spikes from the telescope's mirrors, Numerous other galaxies and stars bespangle the image link graphic.
So for the Stevens Quintet, there's a lot of description here of the color, which is pretty nice, especially for me as someone who was able to see before. So I am able to contextualize things like the color. But again, there's no description on the scale of the image, like how big this galaxy is, or even what is the galaxy in the Stevens Quintet, and also, again, how far this thing is from Earth. Okay, next is the Southern Ring Nebula.
Side views of Southern Ring Planetary Nebula as seen by Webb Telescope. Left parent NIRCam. Left Miri. Right parent against black backdrop of space A bright star appears at center in both images, surrounded by an undulating ring of gas link graphic.
Okay, this one is super confusing. One thing that this image does do is that it describes it as a side-by-side view. So I get some insight as to what perspective this image is being shown in. But I'm going to reveal how little I know about space, which, well, look, okay, I'm an IT guy. I make videos about my life with a vision impairment. I am not a space guy, but I really have no idea what this description is actually talking about. So maybe I'll move on to the next one. Okay, so SMACS, SMACS.
Distant galaxies appear as bright glowing spots in this Webb telescope image with some smeared by gravitational lensing foreground stars appear bright with 6 pointed diffraction spikes owing to the shape of Webb's mirrors link graphic.
Okay, I think this one actually gets the closest to describing the enormity of space that is being reflected in the NASA James Webb Telescope images. So for example, it used the word distant, though I guess in this case it's actually kind of breaking one of the rules of alt text, which is to not use subjective language. Maybe it would have again been useful to describe in concrete terms how far away the galaxies were. And one of the things I noticed from this description as well is that it describes why there is a smearing effect on the photos, which is caused by gravitational lensing, whatever that is. But that's the point, right? I don't know what gravitational lensing is, and so maybe a brief description would have been helpful. A lot of the images also mention the diffraction spikes that appear as a result of the sort of hardware of the telescope, but this is the only one that actually has any explanation on why the diffraction spikes actually appear in the images. So it might have been actually quite nice for them to be consistent across the different images to describe that. Now, so far, have the images actually conveyed successfully the beauty of the JWT images? Unfortunately, no. I still have no idea what they aesthetically look like in a sense. I have a lot of descriptions on sort of technical and literal details like the color and shape, but unfortunately, the alt text doesn't really describe to me subjective things like beauty and appearance and even things like awe, and that's fine. Alt text is not supposed to describe these kinds of things, but it does help to contextualize why even with an agency like NASA doing their best to make us feel included, people like me still can feel, you know, a little bit left out. Now, one thing I did notice on my hunt around for NASA's images is that their Instagram actually has some different alt text. So let's take a quick look.
The background of space is black. Thousands of galaxies appear all across the view. Their shapes and colors vary. Some are various shades of orange, others are white. Most stars appear blue and are sometimes as large as more distant galaxies that appear next to them. A very bright star is just above and left of center. It has 8 bright blue, long diffraction spikes. Between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock and its spikes are several very bright galaxies. A group of 3 are in the middle and 2 are closer to 4 o'clock. These galaxies are part of the galaxy cluster SMACS 0723, and they are warping the appearances of galaxies seen around them. Long orange arcs appear at left and right toward the center. Pinned post icon link graphic.
Okay, wow. So one of the things that immediately stands out is how much more descriptive this particular alt text is compared to the rest. And I guess it makes sense, you know, maybe NASA's website is very functional and technical and dry, whereas their Instagram is meant for the wider consumer. So maybe that might make some sense. But yeah, honestly, this alt text here is really amazing. It gives me a slightly better appreciation for the enormity of space that the James Webb Telescope is supposed to try to capture.
First image: a planetary nebula seen by the Webb telescope's NIRCam instrument against the blackness of space with points of starlight behind it. The nebula itself is shaped like an irregular oval with lacy reddish-orange plumes of gas and dust. Further inside the circle, the gas and dust glows bright blue. A glowing white ring separates the red and blue gases. In the center of the rings are 2 stars, one glowing much brighter than the other with diffraction spikes radiating out from it. Pinned post icon link graphic.
I think this last one is by far my favorite image description. It's describing a lot of things that are happening in the photo, including things like color and the position and different types of objects. I think this one gets the closest to describing the majesty, if you want to use a corny word, of space. And so I think we're going to end it here. I don't think you want to hear more of my computer's robot voice reading image descriptions of space when probably most of you can actually see the images for yourself. But seriously, thanks to NASA for putting in the effort to describe these images. It really goes a long way in making their efforts more inclusive in terms of who can enjoy the images and appreciate them, even though, you know, I probably wish that I could see them as well. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you would like to learn more about what it's like to live with blindness, you can subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for more. If you really want to support my efforts to educate the world about what it's like to live with a disability, you can also support me on patreon.com/Josh Tseng. That's JoshTseng. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!